This is an article that I found that came out by the Trumpet, July 30th, 2018. I think you're going to find a lot of this interesting. I've been saying for a while that China is using the fentanyl on the American people, just like another opium war. But this time, China's going to win. They're going to win this war, y'all. It's too many people strung out on drugs. And America is still trying to go all light-handed with these drug addicts. And this is going to be one of the biggest destroying factors of America because they won't see this whole thing for what it is. I remember when I did my first video saying that China is using the fentanyl to destroy America. The first thing YouTube did was demonetize that video. But you know what? Here's the irony. 3 weeks later, I started seeing those stories crop up in the media. So here we go. When you think they're not watching us, ladies and gentlemen, they're watching. I know they're watching me because I can go in and look at the demographics of who and where and what platforms are watching me. The mainstream media is watching many of us on YouTube. Fentanyl, China's secret weapon to destabilize America. Now, China has a history of using drugs on any region and nation that they want to destabilize. And when I get into this, you'll see what I mean. You'll see exactly what I mean. The United States is voluntarily exposing itself to a chemical attack. Since 2000, this assault has killed more than 700,000 Americans. The weapon is illegal drugs, and Americans are killing themselves with it. In addition to these drug overdoses, roughly 100,000 Americans have been killed in drug-related homicides. This epidemic is destroying the willpower of 28 million people and costing the economy over $1 trillion per year. Since 6 in 10 drug users under 34, these are the ones that are really dying, the ones 34 and under. These problems are likely to worsen in the near future. If a foreign enemy wanted to undermine America from within, facilitating a flow of illicit drugs into the country would be an effective way to do it. In fact, the People's Republic of China has adopted just such a strategy, and they have used it. China has used this on other countries. Drug overdose is now the leading cause of deaths for Americans under 50. The synthetic opioids like fentanyl are responsible for 1/3 of these fatal poisonings. Since fentanyl is up to 50 times more powerful than heroin, it is only legally available to cancer patients with a doctor's prescription. The majority of fentanyl in the U.S. arrives illegally from China, directly through the mail or indirectly through Mexico. I want you to listen to this next part. I did a video from an article and a video from NBC, and it talked about how easy it was to get drugs from the dark web. And that's the one that they terminated me for and said it was hate speech, and it wasn't. But listen to this. According to a Senate report released in January, Americans purchased nearly $800 million worth of fentanyl pills directly from Chinese chemical labs over a 2-year period. See, this is how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. They go out on the dark web. That just goes to show you there's a lot of people accessing the dark web and buying these drugs directly from China and having them delivered right to their house. Otherwise, that amount of money, it would never be that high. It's a lot of people doing this. So what ultimately happens is China has their website set up on the dark web. And these folks go out looking to buy the drug. directly from China. And China keeps itself anonymous by only accepting Bitcoins for the fentanyl. And then, of course, once they pay in Bitcoins, the Chinese sellers will then turn around and mail the packages of fentanyl through the U.S. Postal Service. So this is saying they sent approximately 500 packages of fentanyl through the U.S. Postal Service. Chinese labs have partnered with Mexican cartel to smuggle fentanyl into America. And we already know that. I mean, come on, there's no big secret. China is the main source of where all the fentanyl comes from. And we have known about the Mexican cartels and all the drugs flowing into America for a very long time. So it should not be surprised that these Chinese labs have partnered up with these drug cartels. Nobody should be shocked by that. But even all the supplies that they need to make meth, that comes from China into Mexico. Then the cartels make the meth, and they actually, are saying 1.2 million Americans are addicted to meth. And this next paragraph, all they're pretty much is saying is, China's working with America to crack down. And no, they're not. China's not lifting too much of a finger, y'all. Even in this article, it's telling you the Chinese government has taken no meaningful action because they don't care. China don't care about these Americans being strung out on drugs. They don't care. And if you remember, Trump was accusing them of flooding the U.S. market with all of the fentanyl, and they were denying it and telling America to look domestically at the factors that are causing the drug crisis there and stop blaming China. Yeah, well, they are saying the same thing about Mexico. China's working with Mexico to help keep the drugs. And we know that stuff ain't working. We know it's not working. You got to be realistic. All of these drugs have never stopped flowing into the country, and it never will. The fact that Chinese companies and the Chinese mafia are trafficking dangerous drugs into America gives the Chinese government plausible deniability. An examination of Chinese military strategy, however, reveals that more is going on than meets the eye. The Chinese Communist Party has a long history of pushing illegal drugs into the hands of its enemy, and they use it as a form of chemical warfare. They use illicit drugs. Okay, now listen to this. After the start of the civil war between the Nationalist Party of China and the Communist Party of China, revolutionary leader Mao Zedong instructed his subordinates to begin cultivating poppies. So they started growing poppies to use in warfare, chemical warfare. That's what the growing of the poppies was for. So when they grew this poppy field, it was strictly used on their adversary because they were having a civil war. And this was the Communist Party that was growing poppies to use on the non-communist parts of China. The communists created opium, and then they start sending the opium into non-communist regions of China at that time. As the people in those areas used the readily available drugs, their societies, governments, and militaries became weaker, and the communists could then conquer the area. And they also used these drugs on Japan. After they did so, they outlawed the use of narcotics. After the Communist Party conquered mainland China in 1949, Mao nationalized opium production and started using narcotics as a chemical weapon to destabilize his foreign rivals, primarily Japan and the United States. Anybody surprised? I'm not. During the 1950s and 60s, Chinese Premier Zhao Enlai managed the nation's narcotic operations. Soviet statesman Mikhail Suslov said in 1964 that Zhao's strategy was to disarm the capitalists with the things they like to taste, which we know is drugs. There is scant evidence that any premier since Zhao has actively managed China's narcotic trade, but Chinese strategies still list drug warfare as part of its larger military strategy to destabilize rivals. You know, I had some stupid troll come in my video that I did on Opium War 2 and said I was wrong. China is our allies. China is not America's allies. Okay, they're not. And you know, that just go to show you how stupid many of these people are that come and make comments. They don't even know who America's allies are and who are the adversaries of America. They haven't a clue. And I remember it was this one woman I worked with, and I think I told y'all this before, and she used to always talk about how her dad hated communists and they didn't like communists and this and that. And one day I got so sick, because she used to talk about this all the time. And one day I got sick of her, and she opened her mouth to talk about communists again. And I told her, I said, America don't hate communists. And she was like, oh my God, how could you say that? I said, this is how I can say it. I said, if America was so concerned about communism, then why did you let all of these Chinese people come to America? They're from communist China, right? You let them all come to America and set up a Chinatown in every major city across America. Okay. You know why? Because America is a whore. Anybody that got a big enough dollar, America will let them screw her. And that's really it. You know, if they're not upset, and I'm sorry, like I said before, if Satan himself came to America and wanted to open up a Satan town across America, as long as he got a big enough dollar, America would let him do it. Okay, plain and simple. All right, so let's get back into this. Recent Chinese doctrine articulate the use of a wide spectrum of warfare against its adversary, including the United States, said in a 2014 report from the U.S. Army Special Operation Command. The People's Liberation Army, Colonel Lai Ying and Xing Sui, outlined China's vision on how China will attack the United States through a combination of military and non-military actions. These methods include trade warfare, financial warfare, ecological warfare, psychological warfare, smuggling warfare, media warfare, drug warfare, network warfare, technological warfare, fabrication warfare, resources warfare, economic aid warfare, cultural warfare, and international law warfare. That don't sound like no ally to me. By turning a blind eye, at the very least, to the actions of China, the Chinese chemical labs and mafia, the Chinese government is enabling the flow of illicit drugs that tear at the fragile fabric of U.S. society. And this is exactly what they want, ladies and gentlemen. China wants to be the world superpower. The only thing they got to do is get America out of the way. How do you get your enemy out of the way? You douse them with drugs. I mean, look, China already owns the debt. And you can see back in the 50s and 60s, they were already planning to do all this stuff to America. America's drug plague is ripping apart families, fermenting crime, crippling the economy, and destroying the next generation of Americans. That's exactly how you do it. See, this next generation is going to be so small. If China plans an attack big enough, they're not going to be able to do nothing about it. Many US leaders have admitted to using drugs in the past. Yeah, they used it on the Black community during the crack epidemic. We already know about that. And 1 in 10 Americans admit they use illegal drugs on a monthly basis. While Mexican cartels and the Chinese Communist Party are facilitating and profiting from this destruction, it is ultimately the depravities of the American people that are leading the US down this path to ruin. Drug pushers may be putting this chemical weapon into the hands of the Americans, but it is the Americans who are using it on themselves and demanding more and more things they like to taste. Strong marriages build strong children. Okay. So what they're pretty much saying is we need strong children who are not vulnerable to drugs. Well, good luck to that. Good luck. I think some kids are not going to turn to drugs because it's just not their thing. But if you got a community of a lot of adults using drugs and the kids are watching this, quite naturally, the kids will want to experiment and use those drugs too. And we have seen too many stories where kids are overdosing on the same drugs that the parents got in the house. So how do you build strong minds? You know, you really have to really keep the drugs away from your kids and keep them away from yourself and set the example. And right now, that is lacking in America all over the place. Okay. Mexican cartels and Chinese labs would have no effect on American society if people knew and clung to, and they're talking about God's law of family living. And America is not a Christian nation. I know they try to push all that mess. Look at the stuff you do within this nation and how you treat your people and lock your people up and fake up crimes to get folks in jail. Trust me, there is nothing Christ-like in any of those things that you do. So no, I don't agree, and I will never say America's a Christian nation. But ladies and gentlemen, please tell me what you think. I really believe this stuff because it matches up with what we are seeing going on in American society today. We see a country that is literally coming apart at the seams because of the high number of people that are addicted to these drugs. And it says, you know, when I was reading, it don't take much for you to even get hooked on opioids. They said usually by the 3rd day of taking opioids, you are hooked. You know, so you can imagine how far along after 20 years of all of these illicit drugs coming in here from China, this country is damn near destroyed by all of these drugs now. I mean, it's reality. A lot of people that are denying it, you're denying it is just making it easy for this stuff to continue to happen. But hey, I don't take opioids or fentanyls, and I'm not interested in taking that crap either. And I would urge my family to stay away from the drugs, y'all. Y'all don't need this stuff. You don't need no additional. We got enough problems in our community. We don't need no additional drug problems on top of that. It was bad enough getting through the crack epidemic. We sure don't need this. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, like the video, share the video. And I want to thank all of you for giving donations over the past few days, and people that recently became patrons. Thank you. I do appreciate your support for my channel. You know, it will allow me to spend more time doing videos and trying to do stories that I think we will all be interested in hearing. Peace, family.